What's going on, everyone? Welcome to this mini episode of Hold On the Fort. I'm joined with Vinay and a very special guest, Rohan. We're going to be talking a little bit about Formula One. But before we do that, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. Keep up to date with our content. We're going to be pumping out for you. But yeah, Rohan, introduce yourself. Let's hear it.
Yeah, my name is Rohan. I'm a friend of Rohan's through his brother Sean. We have our own little podcast called Not a Game. Um, I've been a Formula One fan for the better part of the last 10 years or so. I think I was like randomly flipping through ESPN one morning and it was just kind of on, and I started watching and got really into the sport. So obviously I'm a Mercedes fan. I'm a big Lewis Hamilton fan. And yeah, it's probably my favorite sport, and the sport I pay the most attention to. So excited to be here, excited to talk about it, and yeah.
Yeah, for reference, I'm a McLaren fan. Vinay, what about you? What team are you supporting this year?
Yeah. So a little background on my F1 journey as a fan. I'm relatively new to the sport. I actually never really like understood Formula One until I saw Rohan was watching it one time on a Sunday at a basketball game we were at, and he had it on his phone, and I was like, we're in the fifth row of a live college basketball game, and he's watching the race. Like this has to be good. So I kept like hearing him hype it up and talk about it, and then I watched Drive to Survive. I'll admit, like I watched it on Netflix, and it like validated a lot of things that Rohan was saying about the sport. It was so cool to me. I love the dynamics, the rivalries, the cutthroat competition, and sort of migrated to become a Ferrari fan because of Charles Leclerc. I thought he was, my favorite driver from seeing him on and off the track, and so yeah, I'm rocking with Ferrari. Plus, I have a little bit of Ferrari merch from when I was a kid. I used to rock some Ferrari polos, so it kind of made sense. So I'm excited though. I'm relatively new. I'm excited to learn more about it this season and really start following it more.
For reference, Rohan, the race I was watching during that basketball game was Lewis's comeback in Brazil.
Oh, sick race.
Yeah, that was a fantastic race.
That
And
was a
also for the
fantastic
fans,
race.
I'm also a Drive to Survive fan. That was the one thing that kept me through quarantine. And also Formula One was like the only sport that was happening, relatively started up faster during COVID. So yeah, that was a sport I watched and kept watching, and now, I'm super excited for the season. And before we knew it, the season is starting tomorrow. Friday is the first day of testing in Bahrain. First, I kind of want to talk about the predictions that we have for the race this weekend. What we're expecting, peak and pit for the race. For me personally, I see Red Bull winning this race. I think Max Verstappen and
Yeah.
Red Bull, come out and win this race, contrary to what they did last year when both their cars were tired due to technical issues. I think Christian Horner is definitely, coming to prove that Red Bull is not just like a one and done team, and they can be a dynasty like Mercedes. What do you think, Rohan?
Yeah, I mean, I think all throughout testing, all the signs point to that Red Bull car being just the most dominant. I don't know if you saw earlier this week, there was an interview with Toto Wolff, and he was basically talking about how the aerodynamics of that car allow it to run 10 millimeters lower to the ground than any other car, which doesn't sound like much, but makes a huge difference. And obviously, Max is just on form. So I think it's going to be a Max. Max is going to finish first. I think Leclerc second, and it'll be a toss up between Sainz and Checo for third this weekend.
Yeah, Vinay, what about you? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm just feeling like some shit's gonna go down in this race. A couple of collisions, a few disaster classes. But it is hard to root against, like to predict against Max Verstappen right now. I have been reading up on the reports during testing, as Rohan said. It's just been like pure dominance, and you can tell from the reactions of other teams just how prepared Red Bull is to take over this season yet again. But yeah, I guess I'll be rooting for Charles Leclerc. I think there's gonna have to be some sort of um, like technical disaster for Red Bull for a Ferrari car to take the podium, take number one on the podium. But yeah, right now I'll say Verstappen, but just for all those people who don't watch Formula One, anything can happen, any collision can happen. That's what I'm
Yes.
looking forward to.
Yeah.
Speaking of anything that can happen, one thing I did want to point out is we have a lot of rookies, a lot of new drivers on the grid. We have Oscar Piastri racing for McLaren. We have Nick DeVries who raced last year for a Williams team at Monza. He's starting at AlphaTauri. Nico Hongerberg makes his return in the Haas seat, and
Logan Sargent.
Logan
in the
Sargent for
Williams.
Williams as well. So, like you said, Vinay, these rookies, may not have the most experience driving a Formula One car may crack under the pressure of, that first race. And we saw what happened to Nikita Mazepin after the first race, and he had a crash in the first corner. So, anything could happen. I think one team that's definitely going to underperform is unfortunately McLaren. We saw when I watched the car launch, Zach Brown immediately said, "We're gonna keep our expectations modest for the season," which immediately gave me a red flag that they're not expecting a lot from the season, but we do expect a big upgrade package after your first few races. So I don't expect us to have fantastic performances for the first few races, and I don't expect us to wow anyone at the Bahrain Grand Prix. But
I think they also got the fewest laps in testing also.
Yeah,
so
I
I
think
this isn't the car they want. They're not even putting that much effort into it. It's kind of just like we're waiting for the upgrades to come, essentially.
Yeah. As for our pit, who do you think is gonna underperform the most? I think that Logan Sargent is gonna be a little bit of a flop for Williams. I think the Williams car is probably what is still gonna be the worst on the grid, and I just don't think he's gonna perform. I see there's a lot of hype around him, and I think a lot of that hype is unwarranted. So let's see what happens. He's the first American on the grid for a while.
Yeah, I think it's mostly like he's just the first American. It's like a marketing play for Williams more than anything to capture the U.S. audience. I think he is the least. I'm trying to think of the right word. He's just like the worst driver on the grid, essentially, and I think that's pretty obvious to most people. I think probably the surprising thing is I do think a Williams is going to beat McLaren in qualifying. Is my thing. I think McLaren's going to do really bad this weekend.
I mean, I can see Alex Albon qualifying over Oscar Piastri. I can see that happening.
That's what I think is going to happen. I think that is exactly what's going to happen.
All right, Vinay, what about you? Before we move on to our next topic.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say bold prediction here. Lance Stroll of Aston Martin. I think that him trying to race with screws in his hand is just gonna spell disaster on the grid. I'm projecting that this man just causes a ridiculous collision early in the race. I don't know, something about trying to race in the first race with screws in your hand. You have Sebastian Vettel in the reserves. It's an interesting play for Aston Martin. I think that Aston Martin's gonna have a disaster class just because the vibes are not good going into this race. You got a not 100% driver, and I don't know, Aston Martin. They should be one of the surprising teams in terms of the overall scope of the season, but for this race, I don't really see them making any early splashes.
All right,
correct me if I'm wrong. This is completely based on Lance Stroll having plates in his hand. So,
I think Alonso will do well, and I think he'll be like a top 8 finisher. But I don't think Lance Stroll is going to do all too well.
Yeah, I've spoken to Rohan about this many times. The fact that Lance Stroll is a driver in Formula One. Actually, I've spoken to Vinay about this many times. The fact that Lance Stroll is a driver in Formula One is a complete sham. I don't think he deserves a place on the grid, me personally. But anyway, let's move on. So obviously, practice happened. All the teams got a chance to test out their cars, their vehicles for the season. I wanted to talk about where we think we can give our top 3 and bottom 3 predictions for the teams in the championship. Where we think ballpark they'll be. Let's give early power ranking. So, Rohan, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we've said, I think Red Bull's clearly number 1. I think initial reports are they're 0.6 ahead of Mercedes and 0.3 ahead of Ferrari per lap, and it could be even more. So Red Bull's definitely number 1. I think Ferrari starts the season in number 2, but they definitely, last season faced a lot of reliability issues, durability issues, and just straight up strategy issues. So I could see Mercedes sneaking in there if their upgrades that they have planned throughout the season end up working and Ferrari can't get their shit together. So yeah, but right now Ferrari 2, Mercedes 3, and then I think Aston Martin's at number 4. They've looked stellar throughout testing so far. And I think there was one of the reports out there was that their car actually showed the second best race pace over the long runs out of any team during testing.
Yeah, that Aston Martin looks really, really fast, and I definitely think Fernando Alonso, like you said, will definitely, I think he will carry the team far past what their performance is going to be. Mm-hmm. Having a guy like him, give his advice on the development, and having him at the driver's seat will definitely, exceed expectations. Yeah, I mean, I don't have any qualms with your top 3. Aston Martin at 4 though, I don't know, but Alpine have showed good development, and I really like their driver lineup, even though they may not be the best of friends in Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly.
I just think we saw all those Alpine reliability issues too last year, and it's essentially the same car from what it seems like. Yeah. So that's another case where they just need to get their stuff together and prove it.
Yeah. And as for the bottom 3 teams, I don't see a lot of changes from last season. I definitely think Williams is going to be the worst car. I think Haas makes maybe a jump in the constructor standings based off the fact that they cut off their development so early on last season and focus a lot of their resources on this.
And this is going to be the first year they're actually hitting the cost cap too, they said. So they're putting a lot more money into it with that new MoneyGram sponsorship they got.
Yeah, that's
Have
huge.
you guys seen their new pit sitting area?
Yeah,
yes.
Saving money on the pit.
Yeah, Gunther Steiner said it saved $750,000, I think.
I don't know how much, but yeah, it was definitely in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, and he said all that money is going straight towards developing the car, which is good for them. And so yeah, I definitely think Williams is bottom, and I think Alfa Romeo, or
AlphaTauri,
yeah. And then the rest in the midfield, I think McLaren can end up in a range between 6 and 4. Hopefully 4, but we'll talk about that later. So we talked a little bit about, where we see ourselves at the beginning of the season, but now let's talk a little bit about the end of the season or early predictions. 23 races this year. We have 3 in the United States, which is definitely going to be interesting. So let's talk about what it's all said and done in Abu Dhabi. Let's talk about the Drivers' Championship first. I think we alluded to this first. The Drivers' Championship, I think Max Verstappen wins his 3rd in a row. Unfortunately, not a huge Max guy. Have nothing really against him, but also just I have nothing to root for in Red Bull. But would like to see a little variety. My ideal winner besides Verstappen would obviously, besides the McLaren guys, I think Carlos Sainz is such a lit driver. I don't know. I like Carlos. Even Charles, obviously Lewis. But yeah, I would take Sergio Perez just based off of the fact that I like him more to win the championship over Max. But yeah, I definitely see Max winning the Constructors' Championship, and I see Charles 2nd and Mercedes sneaking Lewis Hamilton at 3rd.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you all too much. I think Max runs away with it, kind of like how he did last year. And then it's one of the Ferrari guys in 2. And then, yeah, I think Lewis Hamilton sneaks in there, as long as the car can stay consistent for him.
Vinay, anything else? What are you?
Yeah, I just think it would be so funny if Max's teammate won the Constructors in the same car as him. That's something that I would probably root for if I had to take a Red Bull winner. Yeah, I can't dispute Max at number 1 winning the Constructors. I feel bad because like Rohan alluded to earlier, Ferrari's strategy was just such a question mark last season, and I don't really see it improving dramatically enough to overtake Red Bull. And I just feel bad because Charles was done so wrong so many times last year, and as was Sainz, and I just love to see those guys get the backing that they deserve in terms of how well they drive the car. Yeah, I think that Charles at 2 is modest. But I do see Mercedes making a push towards that second spot and maybe giving Red Bull a little bit of a challenge just because of that championship pedigree. Toto Wolff and Lewis Hamilton. I see them challenging and putting pressure on Ferrari this year. I think Ferrari at best need to like actually go hard for that second place because I think Mercedes might take it. So I'm gonna say Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton second, and then third I'd say Charles Leclerc.
Interesting prediction. Yeah, I mean, let's see, Ferrari, promoted Fred Vassar to the team principal role. Let's see if, he can improve the strategy blunders that plagued Ferrari last season. But yeah, now let's talk about the teams. Do we think that there's going to be much of a difference from what we see in testing? Me personally, I think Red Bull win constructors, and I think Vinay is right. I do think Mercedes will push Ferrari to second place, but I think that push comes a little too late in the season. I think Ferrari sneaks ahead of Mercedes by maybe 20 or 30 points ahead, and Mercedes finishes third. I'll talk a little bit about where I think McLaren is going to finish in my prediction, my crazy prediction, which we'll get to later. But in terms of the bottom teams, I see Williams finishing last. I think AlphaTauri don't put much development into their car because they don't. I like their driver lineup is not exciting. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think they lost a lot of excitement when Pierre Gasly moved away to Alpine. So I just don't think there's going to be much of a focus to build that car. I think that's just going to be used as a Red Bull like training academy for these guys.
It's like Red Bull's like fashion line with all the clothes, AlphaTauri clothes they make. Essentially, it's like It seems like they're not really interested in developing the car or making the team better.
Yeah. So I think AlphaTauri finishes 9th and Haas finishes 8th.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Vinay, any other prediction?
I will say I'm a huge Pierre Gasly fan. Outside of the Ferrari drivers, I think he's my favorite driver on the grid. He's just a really cool guy. So I'm really rooting hard for Alpine. I think that Gasly will get multiple podiums this year in that car. Just because of who I believe him to be. He's got that dog in him. But outside of that, I guess I'll be rooting for Haas to maybe usurp that 8th place role that you projected them at. But I think that's fair. I honestly, outside of the top dogs, my goal for this year in Formula One is to really understand the nuances of the middle of the grid and sort of that back end too, and just get a really good holistic understanding of the sport this year. So I'm looking forward to following that more closely and talking about it with y'all again.
Yeah, no, we should definitely do an end of season wrap up where we react to our predictions and kind of see where we stand. And yeah, dude, the back of the end, the middle of the pack, and the back end battles are always some of the most exciting ones to watch. But to wrap up this mini episode, let's talk about our craziest prediction for the season. I think McLaren finished 4th in the constructor standings. Like Rohan said earlier, they had the fewest laps in testing. They kind of just said whatever with this car, let's just focus on our upgrade package. I think that upgrade package is going to be very significant. It's going to surprise a lot of people, and I think that will carry us to a few podiums. Hopefully Lando Norris's first win in Formula One. But yeah, let's see. I think he definitely deserves one after his performances last season and the season before. And I think that is on the upper end of realistic pushing crazy. But yeah, that's my crazy prediction. Rohan, what about you?
You're a pretty crazy guy, man. I think my crazy predictions for the season is I think Carlos Sainz scores more points in the Drivers' Championship than Charles Leclerc does.
Oh, interesting.
I think he showed, he was a pretty consistent driver last season. The car this year seems to suit his driving style better, in terms of just it's very high tire deg, and Sainz has shown that he's better at managing the tires over the course of a race than Leclerc has. So I think that's kind of just where my crazy prediction, even though I think everyone's going for Leclerc and he's like the Ferrari number one, I think there's the chance that Sainz does finish higher than him.
All right, Vinay, take us home.
Yeah, let me think. I'm going to say that Sebastian Vettel races multiple races this year for Aston Martin. Sleep on my boy. He's on the bench. but you know, he didn't get that much coverage in Drive to Survive. It's a shame. You know, I feel like he'll come back with a vengeance for a few races. You know, it'll be a pretty cool story. But yeah,
Is he on the reserve team for Aston Martin?
see.
I don't know. I know they reached out to him when
Yeah.
Stroll had the injury, but I don't think he's actually like under. He's not their like reserve driver or anything.
I
as
think
far
that
as I know.
Djokovic guy is the next guy.
Yeah,
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, I was tripping then. I misspoke. Probably just misread a headline there. As you guys can tell, still working my way up to be as knowledgeable in the sport as my fellow Rohans that are joining me today. But yeah, in terms of crazy prediction, I honestly don't know. Like, I don't know. My prediction is that, you know, I will know a lot more about Formula One in a few months so that I can make more, like, I don't know, better predictions. I'm just
Alright.
blanking right now. I'm not gonna lie. I just came out of an exam. Yeah, just straight up blanking right now. So, yeah.
It's all good, all good. With that, that concludes this little mini episode on Formula One. Excited for the season to start again tomorrow. Hopefully this episode is out before practice one. But if it's not, you'll be watching this during or after practice one. Rohan, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
yeah. Thank you guys for having me.
Of course, make sure to check out their podcast, Not a Game. I'll put it in the description.
Nice.
And yeah, check out our big podcast, which will be releasing sometime this weekend. A lot of good topics on this week slate. So yeah, with that, we'll see you next time.
Peace out.